all over the world and all over the U.S. And so I've been before government officials. I've been in front of the UN, in front of over 196 nations, preaching the gospel. I was just with Donald Trump and Senator Rand Paul and Ted Cruz and the Congress. And so I've just been before governments and officials, ambassadors of different countries. And more than anyone, I know how weak I am. So more than anyone, I think I get to see how God's working, because I know it's not me. And I know that like right now, right before I came out, I just fall on His grace and I say, you do it, because it's not me. In my flesh, I'm a very weak person. I'm full of anxiety and depression and worry, and I get paralyzed in hard situations and distress. I don't have peace, and I'm scared to speak in front of people. I don't like seeing people when I'm in distress. I like to be in my own little bubble and be left alone. But in Him, it's different, because He becomes my strength and my weakness. And as I was sharing today, in the body of Christ, I've been able to just fall back on Him and the body of Christ. And every prayer has meant so much to me. I seriously could not have carried on without your prayers and your support and your messages. And so, but when I was a little girl, I came from a Muslim family. When I was a little girl, I got saved, and I had a Bible. Someone gave me a Bible, and it was, I think, it was the Psalm in the New Testament, because I remember one of the first verses I read before my parents snatched it away from me was Psalm 2, where it said, "Today I have begotten you, ask of me and I will give you the nations as your inheritance." And I don't know what it was about that verse, but I always prayed for the nations as my inheritance, and I always prayed for Iran as my inheritance. But I would have never imagined this played out, that years later, 20 years, almost over 20 years later, I'd be speaking about Jesus in front of over 50 million Iranians on a secular news channel, and just the doors the Lord would open. But I was actually a California girl before I was moved to Idaho. I was in California for a short while and near San Jose area, and my parents, when I got saved, my dad thought I should either move them back to Iran, where there was a war, or someone said, well, you can move them to Idaho. There's no one there. You can de-brainwash them back to Islam. And ironically, that's where my parents got saved. And I have to share the testimony of, a little bit about how this came about. When we moved to Idaho, my parents we didn't have a Bible, we couldn't go to church. My parents tried to de-brainwash us back to Islam, and they tried their best effort. And my mom kept getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. My dad took her to many doctors in the U.S. and Europe, back to Iran, and they couldn't figure out what it was. And they brought her back, and she was hospitalized a lot. And finally, someone said, can you just have you've tried everything. Can you have a Christian pastor pray for you? And my mom, who was stubborn for years and years, finally said yes. She was on her deathbed. And so they took her to this little church, and someone prayed for her. And from there, she felt change, and she was secretly watching us, so like a hawk. So my brother and I, who were first saved, my twin brother, she was watching us like a hawk, so we wouldn't read the Bible, but then she was secretly reading a Bible. And over time there was a change in her, and my dad noticed it, and he said, what's happening? And she was scared, because my dad was a radical Muslim, and she shared that, this is what someone prayed for me, this is why I'm changing, and I'm reading the Bible. And over time they saw such a change, they both started reading the Bible and got saved through that. But I have to share something with you, because until I was 18, from the age I got 9, I got saved, until I was 18, I couldn't go to church, I couldn't do anything. So at 18, when I got saved, or 8 years after I got saved, I was ready to leave home and rebel and read the Bible. And and I didn't realize, my brother and I just randomly picked a university. We couldn't pick a Christian university. We picked University of Puget Sound, which is one of the top, some of you might know, it's one of the top 10 liberal universities. So it was kind of a culture shock going to University of Puget Sound and be like, I'm a Christian, and having everyone just be like, you're crazy. My teachers called me stupid, and you don't come to college, this is not the place for this, but the Lord used it to grow me in my faith. But so after I graduated from college, my parents were saved. I ended up, my parents at that time had been saved. We'd found them, they were, had been connected to a church, but I just felt led to this church. They had a young adults, college age group church, and I just felt called to this church, and it's the Calvary Chapel in Boise. And so I ended up going to that church and, going, and my family, at that time they were saved, they wanted to see, which church I went to. One Sunday morning, they came with me, and as my mom and Dad were walking in, my mom walked in, and my pastor was speaking. My mom started crying. And this is, and I'm thinking, I have to share a little bit about my mom. My dad was a radical Muslim. My mom was the first woman before the revolution, before the Islamic Revolution, the first woman under the king that was in military. She had a high ranking. So she doesn't cry. She's a very strong woman. She was one of the first women, the first graduation of military women in Iran. So for her to cry, and I was shocked, and I said, Mom, what's going on? And she said, that's the pastor that prayed for me years earlier. And so it's just amazing, just the divine appointment. I had no clue. I knew someone had prayed for her. 10 years later, I ended up at this church, and she comes in, and this is the pastor. At that time, it was a small church. Now it's a pretty big church. I think there's 7,000 in Boise. For Boise, it's pretty big. But anyway, but it was amazing that I ended up there, and that was the pastor that had prayed for my mom. And that was how my parents' journey had begun to becoming Christians. And I want to focus mainly on what God has been doing in this year. I want to quickly share about how I met Saeed. My parents became Christians, and soon after they realized they had a kind of a crazy daughter, because I was just soon after September 11 that I just felt like God was telling me to go back to Iran, and they just couldn't understand it. My mom, I remember, was like, I'm just a baby Christian, give me some breathing room, just don't do it, just give, it was just too much for her, letting go and letting her 20-some-year-old daughter just go to the Middle East after September 11, when there's talks of war, but I just knew in my heart that God had called me there. And I went there in November of 2001. I met Saeed in 2002. I just kind of, I was very naive. I didn't fundraise or whatever. I just went, I worked, I paid for my way through, and I had a small Bible study. Some of my cousins came to know the Lord. I had about 5 people after a year. I shared with as many people as I could, cousins, and my Farsi was funny because I had a weird accent because I'd grown up in the U.S. And so just the best of my ability, I shared Christ, and there was a small group of people that came to know Christ. Then I met this, and I prayed for my husband. I prayed that the Lord would give me a husband that was radical. I think I didn't realize you have to be really careful what you pray for. And so, I didn't realize how radical he would be. But I have to share this with you. My first arrest was after I met Saeed in my whole entire life. Someone from Boise, Idaho, who I had not gotten any speeding ticket, anything. And soon I met Saeed, and here's a passionate guy who is praying for 5-6 hours a day. And when we were dating, it was cute. When we were married, it was like one of our main marital problems. I was like, this cannot be, you can't be seriously spending 5-6 hours a day walking around the house praying. This is just not real. But, and then he would have a backpack full of Bibles, and he'd walk around the city, and he'd just, pass out Bibles. And of course, and here I was very careful. I was sharing with my cousins and people I trusted. And of course, soon after, I get to know him, we get arrested. And, I want to share this with you because it's been it's something I've always looked back to during this year. When I met Said, he was a pastor of about 150 people. There was a church that had trained him, an underground Bible school he'd been trained. And then just through different people, we got to meet. And the churches grew. I met him in 2002. In 2002, there was about 150 people. By 2005, when we had to leave Iran because Iran got a new president, his name was Ahmadinejad, and he didn't like the Christians. So by the time we left Iran, from 150 had grown to over 2,000 in over 30 cities. So it was just God's grace. A lot of times I'd go with him, and in the U.S., I remember, like, what Said says makes sense in the U.S., it doesn't make sense in Iran. He would tell me, there's a girl there, go evangelize to her. I'd be, like, scared, and he's like, what's the worst that can happen? I'm thinking, well, arrest, death, I don't know. In the U.S., I understand, that's, people would just say no, or, But anyways, he was always like, just tell them about Christ, what's the worst that can happen? And so just seeing God's, I remember we'd go to people and say, do you know who Jesus is? And a lot of people would cry, and they would bring out a hidden cross, and they would say, yes, I know him, my child was dying, and I cried out to God, and Jesus appeared to me. And it was just amazing to know, for the first time I realized whoever calls on the name of the Lord will be saved, and Jesus will appear. Jesus will reveal himself. And as someone who'd grown up in the U.S., I knew that God was not limited, even though it's good to have missionaries. But whoever calls on him, no matter which part of the world, just says, God, who are you? They will find Jesus. And I had so much comfort knowing that when I was in Iran. The first time we were arrested, Said and our house churches were growing, and we had a house church member call us, and he was really scared, and he said, I just feel like someone's following me all day. I feel like something bad is about to happen. So Said said, well, wait till midnight, we'll come over when it's dark. And so we go to his house around midnight, we knock at the door, and as soon as we knock and he comes out, this house church leader, we have Revolutionary Guards, who are the more radical. I don't know if you've seen the Argo. They're the more radical. They report to the religious leader, the Ayatollah. They're the more radical police. They're the religious police. And they're, by many nations to this day, they're considered terrorist groups. So we had them attack us. And I'm thinking, this is a movie. I'm from Boise, Idaho. This is just not, this shouldn't be happening to me. So, as soon as we knock the door, this house church leader, he opens the door. We get attacked, and we get shoved into these cars, and we're driven down these alleys. And we go to this, I don't know what, it was like an interrogation place, but it also held prisoners, maybe a detention. But there was a lot of rooms, and in the middle was a courtyard. And from each room you could see into the courtyard. It was a small window. And we were just moved from person to person. Finally, we were handed down to this top interrogator, and he said, this is your last chance. If you say, and I'm sitting here, Said's sitting here, and the house church member sitting down there, the leader. And he says, if you say you're Christian, if you say you're Muslim, you go free right now. And this is around 3, 4 in the morning. It's been 3, 4 hours of questioning, and we're just tired. And this guy is like, this is the last person who's going to intimidate us. And he says, if you say you're a Muslim, you go free. If you say you're a Christian, you will die. Let me promise you that. And he has evil and anger in his face. And he says, and I know it's the spirit of fear trying to intimidate me. And he says, and it won't be an easy death. You will be tortured. You will be raped. And then you will die. You won't get to see your husband. And for a second, I'd gone to church, I'd witnessed about Christ. I'd stood for my faith since I was 9 in the face of pretty intense parents who were trying to de-brainwash me. University of Puget Sound, I aced through it. I mean, a lot of the Lord used my passion, my heart for Him to lead a lot of the liberal students to Christ. But I'd done a lot of Christian stuff, but deep down when I saw the gun and I saw the threats, I said, how real is Jesus? This is real. This man's face is real. This gun is real. I really, for a few seconds, had to see how real is Jesus Christ, that would I be willing, here's my life, I could have a life with this man. How real is Jesus Christ, that I would be willing to be tortured and raped and die. And I can't say there was anything like today and anything from me. It was God's grace, because I opened my mouth and I said, I'm a Christian. And I knew that second, the Lord just put in my heart, I will protect you. Don't deny me. I won't deny you. I will deliver you. And when I said that, I just had to open my mouth. And when it came out, the guy got mad and he said, give me your testimony, and your testimony will be used against you. And it's it's like confessing to murder or something. And so I, shared it, and then he was very angry. And I'm thinking in my mind, Lord, you said you're going to protect me. This man's getting angrier and angrier and angrier as I'm sharing my testimony. His face is getting red. Then Saeed's turn came, and Saeed said, I'm a Christian, and he heard Saeed's testimony. He was mad. I was imagining Stephen being stoned, like the anger that people had wanting. I just thought, we're not going to make it to the prison. He's going to take our life right now. And, because Saeed was born, and because with me, he said, you were 9, your brain wasn't fully developed, you're a woman, and you're in the U.S. You were brainwashed by the... So he was trying to rationalize why I would become a Christian. Like, okay, this is why. Your brain wasn't, you're this. And so he was like putting me down, but this is like anger. And then Saeed, he was born in Iran, he was raised in Iran, he was being recruited by Hezbollah, he was just passionate Muslim, and God meets him and changes his life, and he's a passionate Christian, but the guy could not understand it. And at the time we were actually arrested, his mom was still teaching at a mosque to the woman. She was ministering to the woman at the mosque. So he knew Saeed's background was a very strong Muslim, and his family was still Muslim, and he lost it. He said, it's over, you are done. I can't understand you, why you would convert to Christianity. I just don't understand it. And he closed our folder, and he said, you're dead. He said, you're dead, that's it. And I'm thinking, again, Lord, you promised you're going to deliver me. This does not look like deliverance. And as they're taking us down, the guards are coming and taking us with these guns. This interrogator just couldn't, there was some war inside of him, and he looked at Saeed and said, wait, I need to talk to this man. So he took Saeed to this courtyard, and this house church leader and I are sitting on a bench, and we're looking into the courtyard. And it's funny now that I think about it. At that time, it was, this interrogator is just like, the house church leader is just like, okay, let's unite and pray. Let's pray that the Lord would close Saeed's mouth, and he would just give him wisdom. This is like evangelizing to this interrogator is death. And you were just praying, and I look up and Saeed's talking, and I'm like, I don't think he's closing his mouth. I think he's evangelizing. But it was interesting because I could see heated discussion, but we couldn't see what they were saying. And they come out, and I see, because there's guards and other interrogators, this guy's trying to hold back tear. He's just like, just go. And he ripped up all the stuff they'd taken, like, it was like 5 in the morning now, all the stuff they'd written down, and he said, just go. And we called Saeed's parents, and we gave the location. Anyways, they came to pick us up. And as we were leaving, this interrogator said, can I have a Bible? I want to know this Jesus. This happened in 2004. I'd forgotten about it because there's just a lot of stuff that had happened in our life, and we left Iran in 2005, and just a lot of drama. But the Lord reminded this to me. When Said was arrested, because one, he said, your life is not in the hands of any people. Said's life is not in the hands of any people. That interrogator wanted to take our life right there. But our timing had not come. It was not our time to go. And two, the world is desperate. The Lord showed me the world that guy needed to know there was a reality. There was a real God. And when Said shared with him in that courtyard how he was a dead person anyway without Christ, that killing him would mean nothing to him because he was dead before Christ and now he had true life. And when he shared with him how depressed he was before this life in Christ, the interrogated, it hit home with him because of his empty life. And the Lord showed me with that testimony that one, don't be scared. That your time had not come at that time, so I didn't let them take your life. And two, people need to see the reality of Jesus. And if we would have denied Christ, I'm sure Christ would have forgiven us, but that man would have never come to know Christ. That man would have never seen the reality. Who's this Jesus that they're standing up for? Who is he? How real is he? And I want to share about this journey a little bit and the message God has put in my heart to share with you. I know this is Missions Week, and I've always had a passion since I was 9 for missions and praying for the nations. This year has been, if I have to summarize something, I think about Jesus. I think about Jesus and the life of Jesus. Even Christmas, when we were. It was a painful Christmas without Said, but the kids sang this song that it's not about this, it's not about the presents, it's about the cross. If we summarize the life of Jesus, we would say the cross. We would say he came to give his life, and so that we would be saved. And the Lord that's all he's put in my heart all this year, that as his disciples, it's been hard for me because from Said's arrest till now, it's been like I've had to carry a cross. I've had to deny myself every day because in my flesh, I'm scared to speak. In my, in my flesh, I don't like to travel. In my flesh, there's a lot of things, Even now, I smiled before I came out because just coming in my travel clothes, as a woman, you like to freshen up. You like to wear something like a cute dress or whatever. And the Lord has had to, and when you step out in the spotlight, it's beautiful because people pray, but there's a lot of negative. There's a lot of threats. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of scrutinizing and tearing you down. So when you take that role and step out, it's not just beautiful. It has very ugly parts. That when I'm going through a trial, I don't necessarily want to deal with that. I just want to be in my bubble. And it's been a rough year all around, but one thing that Jesus has spoken to me about being his disciple and being able to be influential as he was, he's the most influential person in history, is being defined by what he was defined. And we forget that as Christians because someone growing up in the U.S., we forget it's about the cross. And Jesus, the one thing that defines him is the cross. And the one thing that should define us as Christians should be the cross. And we forget that. We forget that daily we are to deny ourselves. And the denying is hard. I know for me, every time my flesh wants something or I want to take my right or I think about, like my flesh just fights with me. I get anxiety, I get like my heart gets beat. It's an actual physical denying that I go through. And but it's interesting because I look at the journey and it's been I look at the times where the Lord has had to teach me to deny myself daily, and the first shock was marriage for me. That it just it was hard, and it required, because as a woman, I don't know, as a man, I'm sure you come into marriage, you think it's all about me, I need to be treated like this, and it was a lot of battles between, and I came from the American culture, and he comes from the Iranian culture, and women are supposed to be a certain way, and I wasn't that certain way, and I don't want to go into details, but it just was kind of a lot of, one of the pastors, Iranian pastors, said two waves like clashing into each other, and then kids, I had to like learn, like with kids you have to get over yourself, and then but this, but the thing is, I fought, I had a lot of issues, but this one is where I got it. I was like, oh, this is what it means. This is right before actually all this happened. The Lord was showing me. So this is what it means to deny yourself, and it was a battle. It was a battle to deny myself and to learn to do it daily, and unless you deny yourself what your flesh wants, what you deserve, what you should get, and not being like Jesus who gave his life, but people ridiculed him, and he wasn't treated right, before you can even carry the cross, meaning carry his will in your life. Before that, you have to first deny, you have to empty yourself before you can carry the cross and follow him. And you're not worthy of him if you don't do that. There's no middle ground. I realize that. And once you're able to, and God has a beautiful way of allowing us to die to ourselves daily, because there's people that are in our lives daily, and be it at our spouses, our kids, our work, and we just get bothered by it. But he's in his beauty, God has allowed those things in our life to allow us to deny ourselves every day to our flesh, who says, no, you deserve better, you should be treated like, you need to do this, control this, get that. And those are situations where God, I've seen, allows us to die to ourselves, and no, I'm not going to follow my flesh, I'm going to carry my cross. And it's beautiful, because to be honest, there was a moment where I was panicky, I was covered with depression and anxiety, and I wanted my life a certain way, and everything was falling apart. My husband was taken, my kids were lonely, because now their dad is in prison, their mom is traveling, they're alone most of the time, and I was doing things my flesh didn't want to do, and I felt like I was falling into this. I realized how weak I am. If God removes his hand from me, I'm down into this deep, dark hole that I can't get out of. I'm in this deep, dark place of depression and anxiety, and there's nothing. You can get medicated for it, but most people that I know get medicated for it still deal with it. So it's like, if God takes away his hand, I knew I'd be nothing. I'd be a mess. And I reached out like the woman who's bleeding for 12 years, and I said, you have to get me out of this. And he did, and he has. And he's gotten me back on my feet. Every time I hear bad news with the 8-year sentence, someone said, what's his options right now? He doesn't have an options. The reality is he has 8 years in prison. He's passed 1 year of it. Our appeal has been rejected. There's no more options with the appeals court. If God does not do a miracle, if Said survives the 8 years, if he survives it, I might not see Said ever again if God does not do a miracle. So the reality, and getting the 8-year sentence, learning he's in a new prison, learning he's with murderers and rapists, knowing that he's been threatened, he has knives on his throat, he's covered with lice, he's hurting. And seeing my kids cry and cry and cry and miss their daddy, and having them wake up this Christmas and run around the house because they prayed really hard, and I didn't want to stop them, that daddy would be home for Christmas, and looking all around and coming after an hour of searching outside, inside, coming and saying, Mom, he's not here. And so it's been difficult, as any mom knows, to see those pains, those tears, and see second birthdays, second Christmases. It's passing by. The first ones, it's like, okay, we can do this, and then second ones, it's like, this is the 8 years is really happening. This is second year. And, um, but I'm here to say that I have peace that surpasses all understanding. I have joy that surpasses all understanding. And I have strength that surpasses all understanding because of Jesus Christ, because he's real. And I've been able to share that in front of 196 nations. I've been able to share that with big, influential people in the world, to ambassadors. I think the hardest time when I shared about Christ was at the UN. Here I was in their circle of countries and countries sitting. Actually, they're back to me. And in front of me is this half circle of the top UN officials, and over 196 countries, ambassadors. And here I am, and I know I'm supposed to talk about Saeed, but in my heart, I know I'm there to offer them something they don't have. And it just sounded so silly to say Jesus loves you in front of all those people. But you know what? The verse that came to my mind was this: the world sees as foolishness, but it's the wisdom of God. Because it is. It doesn't make sense, but it's so powerful 2,000 years ago. And what God has done for us, so many still lives change. Each of us have a story of grace. And so that was the hardest time in my life, opening. I was just like, Lord, I'm just going to open my mouth. And these people are looking at me funny. All these countries were around just looking at me. And it just was hard, but I opened my mouth and I said, Jesus is the way to reconciliation with God. And he's the God of peace you're looking for. For 2 weeks, they're trying to resolve the world's problem and bring world peace. And he's the way. You're ignoring the way that to have that peace, that the answer to all of our problems in humanity. And so it was hard, but I opened my mouth and I said it. And I didn't spend a dime to reach millions for Christ in the Middle East, to be on secular media that doesn't like talking about Christianity, but because it was news, they allowed me to talk, and I got to share with the Iranian people that the person who was with me sharing, and it was live. It was the first time I was on live Iranian TV, and I'm thinking, do they know what they just did? Because I've been on taped ones where my friend who used to work for media, she said, just say Jesus, 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 and so many times that if they have to cut it out, it just sounds weird. And so I was ready to do that. I was ready to just say it, and I go to this thing, and I'm ready for a taped interview, and it's like 5, 4, 3, it's like live. I'm like, wow, this is great. But it was hard. It was hard because my Farsi's not that good, and the person sitting next to me was like a doctor and something, and he was using these big words, and I was just trying to catch one word to see what he was talking about, because 80% of his words I couldn't understand. And so I'm like, I just need to, get some words so I can just still, be in the game and don't look stupid when, he says, what do you think? But you know what I got to share with my people? This guy was saying that we shouldn't lose our culture. We should cling to our culture and to our religion of Islam. And I got to share to my people, millions and millions that were watching on prime time, that 600 years before Islam was Christianity in our country, and we were the first to worship Jesus at his birth. The Persians. We were the first at the day of Pentecost. I just learned a lot of the Persian poets wrote about Jesus. And so it's part of our culture. It's a lie of the enemy. A lot of people in the Middle East think if they become Christians, they lose their culture. And I got to say that's not true. And it's interesting because the host asked, actually, is it illegal to become Christian? And the lawyer who knew the Iranian law, he was from Iran, he said, no, according to Iranian law. So here I am telling the Iranian people, become Christian, and here's the lawyer saying it's not illegal to become Christian. Because, a lot of people say, well, he broke the law. I want to share this because a lot of the criticism says he broke the law, he deserves it. Iran in internal law allows for conversion. Said and I, when we got married, I know my time is running out, but I have to share with you. When we were married, we went to the Iranian government. He was a more moderate president, was there. His name was Khatami. It was before Ahmadinejad. We went and said, we're Christian converts and we want a Christian wedding. And they said yes. So they recognized our conversion because in their law they can. And we had my pastor, Bob from Calvary, come. And there was this church, and the Iranian government thought, oh, they're going to invite 30 people. It's just going to be over with. We thought 300 because we invited a lot of people. And we had wedding favors, Bibles, and Jesus films, and they had a little. And 600 showed up. And I have the video. I need to show it when Pastor Bob's here. But people are getting saved. It's not a church. It's not a wedding. I actually got in trouble for it afterwards because it was not about me. He's up on the pulpit, like preaching. People are getting saved. It's like worship, and I'm just sitting on the side, kind of like in my wedding dress, thinking, I imagined something different for my wedding. I have to be honest. He did get in trouble for that. We had a fight afterwards, but it was, people got saved. It was all about Jesus. It was Said's chance of doing a crusade. He knew he had a church. He knew he had the church. He knew he had the government's approval. But here's Revolutionary Guards circling the church, and my wedding photographer. In Iran, it's illegal to drink. He'd had a few drinks, not at our church. We didn't have drinks there, but he's kind of scared for himself because he's like, do you know there's Revolutionary Guards circling the church? And we're like, shh, don't tell the Americans. They're going to freak out. Well, there's Revolutionary Guards, and I didn't tell my pastor till later, circling the church with guns as we're in the center of Tehran, the capital. There's worship blasting out in front of one of the largest mosques in the city. And that was our wedding. But I need to bring the video someday and to show it. But it's not illegal for Iran in its own law allows for conversion. It allows for peaceful gatherings. Iran sits on the Human Rights Council of the UN. So in the international laws that it has continually agreed to, every year they agree to it more and more, like every year they can sign into it. They have said they allow for religious freedom, they allow for conversions, they allow for peaceful gatherings. So I wanted to share this because according to Iran's own law, they're holding him Said illegally. They've tortured him illegally, they're holding him illegally. That's why there's been the UN, the European Parliament, the EU, so many people, human rights groups that are not Christians have spoken out because this is an obvious violation of human rights by Iran. So, but I want to close with this. If anything, I want you to, one thing that the Lord, I didn't plan. My heart was to reach the nations. And my heart was missions, but it didn't turn out that way. Our house churches ended up, after we left, falling apart. Our marriage was falling apart. Everything just went flat. When Said and I had no plan, our desire was the nation to share the gospel, but we didn't have money, we didn't have a ministry, we didn't have a plan. But it's the same time, there was a moment I knew I had finally learned, and I can't say I've learned it now, but I started getting the hang of dying to myself. And that moment, I just could sense God moving, saying, okay, now you've backed off, now I can move. And from that moment, it's been a learning process of dying to myself and just being like, but this is his message, is when you learn to die to yourself, you're not worthy of being his disciple unless you die to yourself, your desires, what you deserve, what's good for you, your plans. Said and I had no plans, and we had no money, but God has reached 196 nations with the gospel. God has reached over 50 million Iranians with the gospel of Jesus. God has reached ambassadors. I've had private meetings with government ambassadors, with people, influential people. A couple weeks ago, I met with Donald Trump, and just, a lot of senators and congressmen and people I would have never thought. But I didn't plan it. To be honest, if there's a secret in anything, is God was just teaching after years of hard marriage and hard raising the kids, and God was finally teaching me to die to myself, and that's when He stepped in, when He taught me by His grace to step back and say,